Today, UK talks of outlawing encryption, there is a Greek financial crisis, and currency wars are heating up. Your host is Rick Falkvinger, and this is Liberties Report.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Good evening and welcome to Liberties Report Week 3. We've got a interesting spectrum of things happening this week. We've got David Cameron going out and saying that internet encryption should be banned altogether. We got a Greek bank run. The 4 largest systemic banks in Greece are now having a run on them. And we are seeing a lot of currency warfare overall. Let's take this one at a time. This has been a really exciting week for Liberty's standpoint. So first of all, David Cameron is going out and saying that there should be no communication which the government could not eavesdrop. I don't know what this guy is smoking, but he should sure subsidize it. Now, media has written that this means that David Cameron was actually trying to outlaw encryption in the UK. That is not true. I repeat, that is not true. David Cameron is not trying to outlaw encryption in the UK because David Cameron has already outlawed encryption in the UK, or his predecessor. Encryption was outlawed with the so-called Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act about a decade ago, or over a decade ago, just after the turn of the century. Strictly speaking, it didn't outlaw encryption. It just said that if the police happen upon an encrypted container and somebody refuses to give out the keys, that person who refuses to give out the keys can be put in jail for up to 2 years or 5 years if it's a terrorist offense, which is every offense these days. Yeah, I'm serious. You know that when you have peaceful protests outside of the London Stock Exchange being classified as low-level terrorism, anything the government doesn't like is now called terrorism. But this doesn't mean just that encryption has been banned, even though it's effectively banned. What it means is that if the police stumble upon something that they think is encrypted, that means you're going to be sent to jail for an inability to unlock it, for an inability to produce the documents that the police claim is in that noise file from the local radio telescope you use to generate random numbers. There doesn't have to even be a key. It doesn't even have to be an encrypted container. It's enough now that you're unable to unlock what the police claim is encrypted to go to jail for 5 years. In effect, you're being found guilty of inability to prove your own guilt. So this has been the law in effect for over 10 years. So if encryption is already that outlawed in the UK, just what did David Cameron propose anyway? Well, he did say that there should be no communication. The government cannot eavesdrop. Frankly, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. That means not just internet communications. That means things like, vocal cords. That means he's essentially outlawing whispering, face-to-face communication, in addition to all the huge consequences for the British IT industry. So, frankly, the guy has no clue whatsoever what he was talking about. Now, that might not be unusual for politicians, but it has quite dramatic effects when somebody says something like that. And President Obama of the United States, chimed in this week saying, agreeing with Cameron that there shouldn't be any communication the government couldn't eavesdrop. Now, the NSA might be 9 orders of magnitude worse than the East German Stasi, as we've seen here before, but, the same problem with vocal cords still applies. So, this is not going to happen. We need to pick a fight on it. We need to take that fight. We need to understand why. We need to make people understand why encryption is not just vital to civil liberties, but to the economy as well. People tend to care about the economy more than civil liberties these days. So, yeah, UK is not going to outlaw encryption because UK outlawed encryption about 15 years ago. Sorry about that. Next, we have a euro crisis coming up. If you haven't got a stock of canned food, now might be a good time to stock up. In Greece, there's a bank run on the 4 biggest systemic banks already. And a bank run means that everybody's running to the bank trying to withdraw their money, which is supposed to be in the bank, but usually isn't, because the bank never actually has that money on hand. It not just loans all of it out, but it loans about 20 times more money out than is actually deposited in the bank. So-called fractional reserve banking. Yeah, yes, this is legal. Don't ask me why or how this is legal, but it is legal. It's part of bank regulation. So, if you're seeing a bank run on 4 of the biggest banks with an election coming up where the favorite winner or favorite party has just said, we're not going to pay back Greece's debts, we're in for a ride. It's not just the Greek economy that's falling over like a domino brick here. Next in line, you got Portugal, you got Italy, you got France. And if Portugal, Italy, and France fall, yeah. Europe is the world's largest economy, so yeah, I hope this might be a good time to stock up on canned food, to be honest. And finally, you've heard how I've been talking a lot about currency and how important it is which currency the world is using for trade and why that is important. We're seeing part of that now with the euro, the effects of having the entire eurozone become liable for the debts taken by any one nation, which frankly has led us to this mess in the first place. You can't have a common currency in a zone where people become liable for each other's debts like that. It doesn't paint a rosy future. But most conflicts in the past 50 years at least can be traced to currency domination. And we're seeing that again. We're seeing the US dollar being challenged. So whenever the US dollar has been challenged, a war has followed. This time, the US might not want to go to war against Russia and China. And if the US dollar is successfully challenged, the US government will be unable to sell further US government bonds in order to fund its vast overconsumption. That's going to be interesting too. So you have the Greek and thereby the European economy in crisis, you have the US economy in crisis, you have Russian economy in crisis, you have Chinese economy in crisis. Now, how about that stock of canned food? I'm Rick Falkvinge and this is Liberties Report. Visit our sponsor, Private Internet Access. Good night.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Liberties Report is produced using exclusively free software.